Hi everyone, this is Arvind from MindMajix, and today I welcome you all to this amazing session on Splunk interview questions. So guys, in this particular video, we will be covering a few set of questions, and we have divided those questions into three categories. So the first category of questions is the basic interview questions of Splunk, obviously, and then we have Splunk architect interview questions, and finally we have Splunk scenario-based interview questions. Okay, so this is the whole idea, or you can say the agenda for this particular video. So without any further ado, let's get started with our first question. The first question over here is, what do you mean by Splunk, or what exactly is Splunk? So Splunk is Google for your machine data. So it's basically a software or an engine which can be used for searching, visualizing, monitoring, reporting of your enterprise data. So Splunk basically takes valuable machine data and turns it into powerful operational intelligence by providing real-time insight into your data through charts, alerts, and reports. So guys, this was a quick definition of Splunk. And now let's move ahead with the next question. So guys, the next question over here is compare Splunk and ELK stack. Okay. So guys, whenever you're asked such kind of question in the actual interview as well, so what you can do is you can grab a piece of paper, and on that paper, what you can do is you can draw two columns, one for Splunk and the other one for ELK. And in those columns, you can write the points of differentiation. Okay. So over here, we are comparing Splunk and ELK based on a few features. As you can see over here, features is mentioned in the first column. Then the second column is for Splunk and the third one is for the ELK. Okay, so the first point of comparison over here is log management. So in both Splunk and ELK, log management is highly supported. Okay, and if you talk about the second point, which is customization, so customization options are available in Splunk as well as in ELK. After this, if you talk about advanced reporting, so even this feature is available in Splunk and ELK. Okay, and the next point is robust search. So both of these tools are capable of robust search. Okay. And if you talk about deployment, so both of them are easy to deploy. Okay. And the next point is dashboard features. So Splunk basically offers more features than ELK, whereas ELK offers less features when compared to Splunk. Okay. And if you talk about community support, so highly professional community support is available with Splunk, whereas since ELK is open source, so it has more benefits due to huge user base. Okay, now the next point over here is the latest version. Okay, so if you talk about Splunk, so here the latest version is 9.0, and in case of ELK, here you have version 5.0. Okay, the next point is pricing. So for Splunk, it offers enterprise editions, and ELK is open source, so it is free of cost. Okay, now if you talk about the API support, so for Splunk, you have RESTful APIs and over 200 plus endpoints. Okay, whereas in case of ELK, you have RESTful APIs and JSON. And the last point of comparison over here is the third-party integrations. So for Splunk, the app portal provides thousands of add-ons. And in case of ELK as well, you have plenty of options for integrations and plugins. Okay, so guys, this was a comparison between Splunk and ELK. The next question is compare Splunk and Hadoop, or what is the difference between Splunk and Hadoop? Okay, so guys, based on the previous question, even in this question, we have made two columns over here. The first one is for Splunk and the second one is for Hadoop. Okay, so for Splunk, you have annual subscription, whereas in case of Hadoop, since it is open source, it is free of cost. Okay, and for Splunk, you have cloud-based service available, whereas in case of Hadoop, you have distributed file system designed to run on commodity hardware. Okay, and one critical difference between the two is Splunk is a tool, whereas Hadoop is a framework. Okay, so a framework consists of multiple components. Okay, and whereas Splunk is a single tool. And if you talk about the usage, so Splunk is basically used to collect and index data, whereas with Hadoop, you have file system namespace. Splunk is a log analysis platform, whereas Hadoop is a big data file system, or you can say Hadoop is used to process big data. Okay, so what is big data? Data which is available in huge size. Okay, the next point is device supported. So for Splunk, you have Windows, Android, iOS with iPhone and iPads, and Mac OS as well. Okay, whereas in case of Hadoop, you have Windows, Mac, and web-based. And the last point is Splunk mainly monitors, logs, and analyzes machine-generated big data, whereas Hadoop is ideal solution for ETL and storage of data in HDFS and streamlining analysis. Okay, so this was a brief comparison of Splunk and Hadoop. So guys, the next question over here is, what are the common port numbers used by Splunk? So guys, as you can see over here, these are the services and the port numbers used for them. So if you talk about Splunk web port, so here you have the port number 8000, whereas for Splunk management port, you have port number 8089. And for Splunk indexing, you have port number 9997, and for Splunk index replication port, you have port 8080. Now, if you talk about Splunk network port, so here you have 514, and this is basically used to get data in from the network port, which is basically a UDP data. And the last point is KV store. So for KV store, you have the port number 8191. Guys, the next question over here is, what are the components of Splunk, or you can say the Splunk architecture? Okay, so guys, you can refer to the diagram which is present on your screen right now. So if you talk about the components of Splunk architecture, so here you have search head, which basically provides GUI for searching the data. Then you have indexer, which indexes the machine data. So here you also have forwarder, which forwards the logs to the indexer. And you have the deployment server, which manages Splunk components in a distributed environment. So guys, search head, indexer, forwarder, and deployment server are the critical components of the Splunk architecture. The next question is, which is the latest Splunk version in use? So guys, the latest version release for Splunk is Splunk 9.0. The next question is, compare Splunk, Logstash, and Sumo logic. Okay, so guys, based on the previous questions, like we have seen a couple of different questions, like compare Splunk with Hadoop, and one more question we saw. So over here, similarly, we are comparing Splunk with Logstash and Sumo logic. Okay, so if you talk about Splunk, so Splunk is basically a very big player in the log management tool space, whereas Logstash is a open source log management tool, and Sumo Logic is a software as a service version of Splunk. Okay, now Splunk is basically an on-premise model, whereas Logstash is a software as a service based model, and Sumo Logic is used as a part of the ELK stack along with Elasticsearch and Kibana. Okay, and now if we talk about installation of Splunk, so you can easily set up Splunk on your local system. And if you talk about Logstash, so you can set it up a communication out to the Sumo Logic cloud. Whereas in case of Sumo Logic, you can set it up on your own system or locally. Okay, so in case of Splunk, you need to plan for the hardware and the space capacities that you need. Okay, so prior planning is very much important in case of Splunk. In case of Logstash, you need to configure the sources that will gather and send the logs to the Sumo Logic. Whereas in case of Sumo Logic, you need to configure the inputs, filters, outputs that you'll be requiring as per your demands. Okay, for Splunk, an extensive amount of features are easily available. In case of Logstash, you have a good chunk of similar features like those in Splunk. And in case of Sumo Logic, it gives you the most control over the tools between the development and the community. Okay, with Splunk, you can create and manage your own dashboards, whereas Logstash uses a panel-based dashboard system, and whereas Sumo Logic uses a panel-based dashboard system. Okay, since Splunk dashboards can be either built in XML or through Splunk dashboard editor. So if you talk about Logstash as a part of the ELK stack, Kibana is used as the front end reporting and visualization metrics tool such as Graphite, Libretto, and Datadog. For Sumo Logic, most of the information is presented in a chart-based manner. Now, if you talk about the plugins, for Splunk, you have 600 plus integration plugins. And for Logstash, it has a continuously growing plugin environment with over 160 plus plugins that are available currently. For Sumo Logic, it includes development automation tools, cloud platforms, OS platforms, and compliance and security tools. And last but not the least, the most important part is pricing. So for so guys, the last but not the least, the next point is pricing. So for Splunk, you have $1,800 to $60,000 per year, which is pretty much expensive. For Logstash, it is free, as well as you can avail paid subscriptions in case if you want. Okay. For Sumo Logic, there is a free light version which is present, and the entry level pricing is also very much budget friendly. Okay, so guys, this was a comparison between Splunk, Logstash, and Sumo Logic. The next question is, what is a Splunk indexer and what are the stages of Splunk indexing? So the indexer is the Splunk enterprise component that creates and manages indexes. The primary functions of an indexer are basically indexing the incoming data and then searching the indexed data. The next question is, what is a Splunk forwarder and what are the types of Splunk forwarder? So guys, there are basically two types of Splunk forwarders. The first one is the universal forwarder or the UF. So Splunk agent is installed on the non-Splunk system to gather the data locally, and you cannot parse or index this data. And then the second type is heavyweight forwarder or HWF. So a full instance of Splunk with an advanced functionality generally works as a remote collector, intermediate forwarder, and possible data filter because they parse the data and they are not recommended for production-based systems. The next important question is, can you tell me the names of a few important configuration files in Splunk? So guys, as you can see on the screen, these are some of the important configuration files which are available in Splunk. The first one is the props conf, indexes conf, input confs, transforms conf, and server conf, like server.conf. Okay, so these are some of the important configuration files that you must keep in mind. The next question is, what are the types of Splunk licenses? Okay, so guys, there are a few licensing options that are available in Splunk, such as enterprise license, free license, forwarder license, beta license, and licenses for search heads, like for distributed search. And you also have licenses for cluster members, which is for index replication. The next question is, what is the Splunk app? So Splunk app is a container or a directory of configurations, searches, dashboards in Splunk. So guys, the next question is, where is the Splunk default configuration stored? So guys, as you can see here, this is the location where you can find the default configuration for Splunk, like Splunk home /etc/system/default. The next question is, what features are not available in Splunk free version? There are a few features which are missing in the free license of Splunk, such as authentication and scheduled searches or alerting. Then distributed searches and forwarding in the TCP or HTTP to a non-Splunk based system. And you also do not get deployment management with the free license of Splunk. The next question is, what happens if the license master is unreachable? So the license slave will start a 24-hour timer, after which search will be blocked on the license slave. So users will not be able to search the data in the slave until it can reach the license master again. The next question is, what is a summary index in Splunk? So the summary index is the default summary index. Basically, it is the index that Splunk enterprises use if you do not indicate the another one. So if you plan to run a variety of summary index reports, you may need to create additional summary indexes. So guys, with this, we have covered the basic level of questions for Splunk. And now question number 17 onwards, we will be covering questions which are meant for Splunk architects. So guys, basically these are advanced questions. Okay. So the next question over here is, what is Splunk DB Connect? So Splunk DB Connect is a generic SQL database plugin for Splunk that allows you to easily integrate database information with Splunk queries and reports. The next question is, what is the difference between stats versus transaction command? So guys, the transaction command is most useful in two specific cases. The first one, the unique ID alone is not sufficient to discriminate between the two transactions. So this is the case when the identifier is reused. For example, web sessions identified by a cookie or a client IP. So in this case, time span or pauses are also used to segment the data into transactions. So in other cases, when an identifier is reused, say in DHCP logs, a particular message may identify the beginning or the end of the transaction. So when it is desirable to see the raw text of events combined rather than the analysis on the constituent field of events. In other cases, it is usually better to use stats as the performance is higher, especially in a distributed search environment. Often there is a unique ID and stats that can be used over here. The next question is, how to troubleshoot Splunk performance issues? So guys, the answer to this question is basically very subjective and it could be very wide, but basically the interviewer here would be looking for a few keywords that you must mention in the answer. First, you must check the splunkd.log for any errors. Then you must check the server performance issues like CPU or memory usage, disk IO, and so on. Also, you must install SOS, which is Splunk on Splunk app, and check for warnings and errors which might be present in the dashboard. After this, you can check the number of saved searches currently running and their system resources consumption. After this, what you can do is you can install a Firebug, which is a Firefox extension. After it is installed and enabled, log in into Splunk using Firefox, open the Firebugs panels and switch to Net panel. The Net panel will show you HTTP requests and responses along with the time spent on each. So this will give you a lot of information quickly over which requests are hanging Splunk for a few seconds, which are blameless. So guys, the next question is, what are the buckets, and explain the Splunk bucket lifecycle. So Splunk places indexed data in directories, which are known as buckets. So it is physically a directory containing events of a certain period. So bucket basically moves through several stages as the time progresses. The first stage is the hot. So this basically contains newly indexed data. You can open this for writing as well, and one or more hot buckets for each index are available. Then you have the warm stage. Here the data is rolled from the hot, and there are many warm buckets that you can use. After this, you have the cold bucket. Basically, here you have the data rolled from the warm, and there are many cold buckets that you can use. And the last stage over here is frozen. So here you have the data rolled from cold. The indexer deletes frozen data by default, but you can also archive it, and the archived data can later be thawed. Like data in the frozen buckets is not searchable. The next question is, what is the difference between stats and event stats commands? So Splunk stats command generates summary statistics of all existing fields in your search results and saves them as values in new fields. Event stats, on the other hand, is similar to the stats command, except that aggregation results are added in line to each event and only if the aggregation is pertinent to that event. So event stats computes the requested statistics like stats, but aggregates them to the original raw data. The next question is, how are forwarder licenses purchased? So guys, you do not need to purchase forwarder licenses. So they are included with Splunk. The next question is, what is the command for restarting just the Splunk web server? So the command to restart the Splunk web server is very simple. just have to type Splunk start Splunk web. The next question is similar to the previous question. What is the command for restarting the Splunk daemon? So the command again is very simple, Splunk start Splunk. Guys, the next question is, what is the command to check for running Splunk processes on Linux or Unix based systems? So the command for it is very simple. The command is ps space aux, and then you have this sign. Then you have the command grep Splunk. The next question is, what is the command to enable Splunk to boot start? So the command, as you can see on the screen, to enable Splunk to boot start is, this is the home directory of Splunk, and you have to type command Splunk enable boot -start. And similarly, the next question is how to disable Splunk boot start. So as you can see on the screen, this is the command Splunk disable boot -start. So guys, with this, we have covered the Splunk architect interview questions. And now question number 28 onwards, we will be covering scenario-based questions on Splunk. So basically, these questions are for the experienced candidates, like those folks who have at least 2 to 3 years of experience with Splunk. Okay. And when you have real-time experience, you will be working, like you might have worked on various scenarios in your previous companies. So based on that only, we have these questions. So the question is how to reset the Splunk admin password. So to reset your password, log in into the server on which Splunk is installed and rename the password file at the location and then restart the Splunk. So after you restart, you can log in using the default username and the new password that you have set in the previous step. The next question is how to disable Splunk launch message. So to disable the Splunk launch message, what you can do is you can set value offensive equal to less in Splunk underscore launch dot configuration file. The next important question is how to clear Splunk search history. So guys, to clear the Splunk search history, you just have to delete one file on the Splunk server, which is, as you can see, this is the location Splunk underscore home /var/log/Splunk. And this is the file, the log file that you have to delete. Okay, searches.log. The next question is, what is Splunk btool or how will you troubleshoot Splunk configuration files? So Splunk btool is a command line tool that helps us to troubleshoot configuration files or issues or just see what values are being used by your Splunk enterprise installation in the existing environment. The next important question is, what is the difference between Splunk app and Splunk add-on? Basically, both of them contain pre-configured configurations and reports, but Splunk add-on does not have a visual app. So Splunk app basically has a pre-configured visual app. The next question is, what is .conf files precedence in Splunk? So guys, as you can see, these are the .configuration files in Splunk according to the precedence or the priority. So system local directory has the highest priority. After that, you have the app local directories at the second place. At the third place, you have app default directories. And the last one that you have is system default directory, which is at the lowest priority. The next question over here is, what is a fish bucket or what is a fish bucket index? So it is basically a directory or index at the default location, which is opt/splunk/var/lib/Splunk. So it basically contains seek pointers and CRCs for the files you are indexing. So Splunk D can tell if it has read them already. So you can access it through the GUI by searching for index equal to underscore the fish bucket. The next question is, how do I exclude some events from being indexed by Splunk? So guys, this can be done by defining a regular expression to match the necessary events and send everything else to the null queue. By doing this, you can easily exclude some of the events from being indexed by Splunk. The next question is, how can I tell when Splunk is finished indexing a log file? So by watching the data from Splunk's metrics log in real time? Okay, so there are a few things that you must observe over here. As you can see, index equal to, this is basically the content of the log file. Okay, so here you have the data that has been indexed. After this, you must observe this second statement, as you can see over here. Okay, so you must keep a few words in mind, like charge sum, which is in megabytes, and charge sum megabytes average over series. Okay, and this, the second statement is basically happening split by source type. And if you're having trouble with the data input and you want a way to troubleshoot it, particularly if your whitelist or blacklist rules aren't working the way you expect them to work, so what you can do is you can go to this URL and have a look. So which is that URL? As you can see over here, https:// your Splunk host :8089, which is the port number, then /services admin input status. Okay. The next important question is how to set the default search time in Splunk 6. So to do this in Splunk Enterprise 6.0, you have to use the UI-prefs.configuration files. If you set the value in the Splunk home, so all your users should see it as the default setting. For example, if your Splunk home, like this location, includes dispatch.earliest time and dispatch.latest time, so the configuration file reference for UI-prefs.conf is here at the location or the URL http://docs.splunk.com/documentation/splunk/latest and admin UI-prefs.conf. The next question is, what is the dispatch directory? So guys, the dispatch directory contains for each search that is running or has been completed. For example, a directory named 1434308.943.358 will contain a CSV file for its search results, a search.log with the details about the search execution and other stuff. So using the defaults, these directories will be deleted in 10 minutes after the search completes, unless the user saves the search results, in which case the results will be deleted after 7 days. The next question is, what is the difference between search head pooling and search head clustering? So both are features provided by Splunk for the high availability of Splunk search head in case anyone's search head goes down. So search head cluster is newly introduced and search head pooling will be removed in the next upcoming versions. So the search head cluster is managed by the captain and the captain control all of the slaves. So search head cluster is more reliable and efficient than search head pooling. Guys, the next question over here is, if I want to add or onboard folder access logs from a Windows machine to Splunk, how can I add the same? So guys, there are a few steps that you must follow to add folder access logs to Splunk. The first step is enable object access audit through group policy on a Windows machine on which the folder is located. After this, you have to enable auditing on the specific folder for which you want to monitor the logs. After this, you install the Splunk Universal Forwarder on a Windows machine. And in the fourth step, you configure Universal Forwarder to send security logs to Splunk Indexer. So these are the steps that you must follow. The next question is, how would you handle or troubleshoot Splunk license violation warning error? So license violation warning means Splunk has indexed more data than our purchase license quota. So we have to identify which index or source type has received more data recently than the usual daily data volume. We can check on the Splunk license master pool wise available quota and identify the pool for which violation is occurring. So once we know the pool for which we are receiving more data, then we have to identify the top source type for which we are receiving more data than the usual. So once the source type is identified, then we have to find the outsource machine, which is sending a huge number of logs and the root cause for the same and troubleshoot accordingly. The next question is, What is MapReduce algorithm? So MapReduce algorithm is a secret behind Splunk's fast data searching speed. So it is an algorithm typically used for batch-based large-scale parallelization. So it is inspired by functional programming's map function and reduce function. The next question is how Splunk avoids duplicate indexing of logs. So at indexer, Splunk keeps tracks of indexed events in a directory called fish buckets, and those are present at the location /opt/splunk/var/lib/splunk. So it contains seek pointers and CRCs for the files you are indexing. So Splunk D can tell if it has read them already. The next question is, what is the difference between Splunk SDK and Splunk framework? So Splunk SDKs are designed to allow you to develop applications from the ground up and not require Splunk web or any components from the Splunk app framework. So these are separately licensed to you from the Splunk software and do not alter the Splunk software. Now, if you talk about Splunk framework, so Splunk app framework resides within Splunk's web server and permits you to customize the Splunk web UI that comes with the product and develop Splunk apps using the Splunk web server. So it is an important part of the features and functionalities of Splunk software, which does not license users to modify anything in the Splunk software. So guys, with this, we have come to the end of the session on Splunk interview questions. I hope you guys have enjoyed this session. If at all you have any queries or doubts related to this session, then you can write them in the comment section and we will try to resolve your doubts and queries as early as possible. So guys, thank you so much for being with us and I wish you all the very best for your upcoming Splunk interview.